They got billions of dollars in bailout money from us, the taxpayers. And today on Capitol Hill, those troubled banks and the officials in charge are getting grilled about what they did with our money. With all the different rescue packages you've been hearing about recently, it's hard to forget the one that kicked it all off. It was TARP, Troubled Assets Relief Program #1. That's the $700 billion bailout pot approved back in October of last year. It was designed to help some of the country's biggest banks stay above water, and now some lawmakers are livid over how these banks spent the money.
If it was the business judgment of the very same bankers in charge that governed their decisions before the financial crisis and arguably helped create the crisis, is it tolerable to continue to defer to that judgment and allow them to spend taxpayers' money with no explanation, little accountability, and no questions asked?
Keep in mind, a lot of criticism aimed at the former Treasury Secretary Hank Paulson and the Bush administration, which crafted the first TARP package. Defending their moves today, Neel Kashkari. He's one of the men put in charge of the bank bailout by the Bush administration.
Our nation was faced with the potential imminent collapse of our financial system. Had the financial system collapsed, this recession, including terrible job losses and numerous foreclosures, could have been far, far more severe.
And the explaining is still going on right now. Joining us, Congressman Dennis Kucinich, Democrat from Ohio, also a member of the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform. Congressman, good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You know, could Neel Kashkari, the bald man there who just said this would have been a lot worse if we hadn't done what we did, couldn't he be right?
Well, he could be wrong, and I think he is wrong. I voted against the TARP from the beginning because I didn't believe that it was right for government to intervene in the markets the way that we did. And now what we found out today is that we Treasury gave all this money to banks, but didn't keep track of how the banks were actually spending the money. We found out that money that was TARP money that American people presume would go to help get businesses going in this country, instead we're going to Dubai and China and India and billions of dollars. Yes. I
was just going to say, it was a stunning thing to actually hear laid out like that. When you say TARP, that's this Troubled Asset Release Program, the $70 billion. Congressman, do we have an idea about how much of that money was used in Dubai or somewhere overseas?
Yeah, well, what we know, and the Treasury could have kept track of this, but they have so far decided not to. I think that'll change. What we found out, for example, Citigroup arranged a loan for $8 billion in Dubai. That Bank of America helped to, was involved in a stock deal for $7 billion in a Chinese construction company. That a division of JP Morgan Chase had a $1 billion deal going in India, and all of these transactions came just after they got TARP funds. So, you know, the committee's continuing to look at this, and as chairman of the subcommittee on domestic policy, I'm committed to getting Treasury to keep track of these funds so the American people know how these TARP funds are actually being used and if they're benefiting our domestic economy.
Congressman Kucinich, if you look back on this, it all began with changing of laws which allowed basically for the deregulation of all of these banks, the downtown banks. Shouldn't we go back to a place and shouldn't we never have taken this route? And didn't it happen because of their lobbyists and for them and never for all of us?
You're absolutely right. And as a matter of fact, the Financial Modernization Act, when it passed, took down the post-Depression firewalls that separated finance and insurance and real estate. And once they could all package their business together and put out these asset-backed securities, we then set the stage for the kind of leveraging of debt that created the nightmare when the deleveraging occurred, because they were building wealth based on basically nothing. So the American people are paying dearly. Do you know that it could be $3 trillion by the time this thing is over? And yet we still have people getting laid off, losing their homes. This is just such a nightmare. So I'm going to keep on top of this to make sure there's accountability and to try to put an end to this insane spending of taxpayers' dollars.
But what concerns so many people is that the lobbyists who were working back then to change the rules that separated, to take down the walls of separation, are working right now to continue to manipulate the rules on the behalf of those big banks.
Well, you're absolutely right, and I can tell you that this is something that, as chairman of domestic policy, I don't think there's any any difference between the position that I have and my Republican counterparts have on the committee. Democrats and Republicans, we are aligned to make sure there's accountability and to try to nail these lobbyists who are just looking at trying to exploit the misery of the American taxpayer by grabbing more money for these interest groups that led us astray.
Congressman Dennis Kucinich of Ohio will stay on it. You do too. Thank you. Breaking news from Planet Blago is next.